Hello, everyone, and welcome to Embracing Your Earth Journey. I am Stephanie Briggs, your host, and I am so excited and thrilled to be speaking today with my dear friend, James-Olivia Chu Hillman. Hi, James.
Hi, so happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Yay. So James-Olivia Chu Hillman is a relational life and leadership coach and a mediator, facilitator, and enthusiastic advocate of necessary, uncomfortable, and life-changing conversations. And they work with people who want more joyful connection and less suffering in their relationships with themselves, the people they care about, and the world. So James-Olivia, today we're going to be speaking together about right relationship. And so let's just dive right in. Like, could you tell us, what do you mean by right relationship?
Oh, this is one of my favorite questions. I'm so glad you asked this. Um, and I'm pretending like that wasn't one of the things I asked you to ask me about. Let's just be real here. Um, so when I talk about right relationship, I don't mean good relationships, like the relationships where nothing ever seems to go wrong. We don't have any tension or conflict. Um, Everybody's nice to each other, and we never fight. What I'm talking about is, and I'm also not talking about romantic relationships alone. I am talking also about our romantic relationships and our intimate partnerships. But when I say relationship, I'm talking about all the relationships that we have with everyone and everything, and that we are, the fundamental belief here is that we're always in relationship. Like,
Hmm.
we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in connection, in relationship to everything and everyone around us, and we have relationships with our ideas, and we have relationships with spirit, and we have relationship with the earth. We have relationship with all of the other beings on the planet, not just humans. um, we are we are always in relationship, and right relationship doesn't necessarily mean pleasant and good. For me, I'm talking about whether or not it's just and whether or not it's sustainable.
Hmm. So we're always in relationship, whether we like it or not.
Hmm. Yes, very much so. So when I hear people say, "Oh, I don't have a relationship with that person," I'm like, "Oh, but you do." Like, you really do have a relationship with them, and it might not be a close relationship. It might be an estranged relationship. And a estranged relationship might be right relationship because of the, unhealth of the dynamic that you two may have together. um, right relationship doesn't always look like a healthy, functional, pleasant relationship. Sometimes it looks like, oh wow, I can't necessarily talk to that person, not just on a regular basis, but like ever, because right relationship is me estranging myself from somebody who's abusive.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and sometimes like that's a necessary choice.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and is this like a static thing, or this is like something that can shift, right?
Oh, this is such a setup question. I love that. you, you already know me, so I love these. Um, so I'm going to kind of swerve us a little bit into the embracing your earth journey topic, because as we were talking about a few minutes before we started recording, I'm thinking about a lot about the cycle of harmonious relationship. um, how even our relationships, because I told you I'm we're in February right now, so I know that this won't be, people won't be seeing this until later on. But right now, I'm coming up on the anniversary of my mother's death, and it can be a pretty big grief anniversary for me. It's been almost 10 years, and for some reason, this year is hitting me like way differently than probably any other year since she died.
Mm.
And it's surprising to me. Like, it's sort of knocking me sideways because I'm like, wait a minute, it's been almost 10 years. What what is going on that this would not be just getting easier and easier and easier? And so at the same time, and this is a hilarious, not coincidence. Um, so my partner and I, Ben and I, just got in a sort of a spat recently that we had to do some repair on this morning. And he and I talk a lot about the cycle of harmony and tension and repair, and how all of these things, like right relationship with ourselves, right relationship with our grief, relationship with one another, relationship with the earth, that this is all cyclical. Like we're born into this human existence, and the journey is not linear. Like this grief journey is not linear. This love journey that I have with him is not linear. um, what we're going through, even if we did not have a world on fire with climate change, we would still have these nonlinear cyclical. Oh, you're an astrologer. Like, of course, of course, you're looking at the way that we travel through the lessons that we have to learn, the experiences that we're going to have, the Mercury retrograde that we're currently in. Are we in it right now? Is this?
Yeah, we are at the time
Oh,
of recording.
yes. Okay. So yeah, but these are all cyclical journeys, and right relationship itself is definitely not a linear, like, hey, I get to meet you, Stephanie, and we click and we hit it off, and then nothing ever changes. Like, we change as humans, we change. Like, I'll change, you'll change, circumstances will change, the planetary alignments will change, the seasons will change. Like, grief anniversaries will happen, tensions will arise, conflicts happen. We do harm to each other, whether we mean to or not. And how do we move back into a place of right relationship? We have to go through repair. So that was something Ben and I did this morning. We went through a gigantic repair. Um, and it doesn't bring us back to the same harmony that we had before. It's not like right relationship even looks the same once we go through the cycle. It's, oh, okay, right relationship looked like this before something knocked it sideways, before I did something that warranted an apology, or before, my body chemistry changed and everything felt more sensitive, or before this other thing happened, or like we had a child, or not that we have a child, but like, things shift, tensions are. And so what we come back to when we get back to right relationship isn't the same thing that we had before the tension, or before the conflict, or before the harm. Because whatever changes doesn't necessarily change back.
Hmm. So what I'm getting is like, um, right relationship could be like a process, just like our lives are a process, or like our earth journey. Like I think of it as like a
Mhm.
process that we're always in, that's like always emerging,
Mhm.
like in every moment, and that that we're in relationship with our lives. And yeah, so and it sounds like we have choices about how to be in relationship. And yeah, that it doesn't fit the sort of like, yeah, linear progression that like our dominant culture will like indicate that we're supposed to be on, getting from point A to point B. And like there are all these ideas of like maybe how it's supposed to look, and judgments that go along with that. And yeah.
Yeah, just hearing you reflect that back, I think about the way that we're taught to be, and especially, people conditioned and socialized as women are taught to be in relationship with their own bodies. That, you're born, you're a baby, you mature, and then there is a body that you are supposed to have. Like, you end up with some ideal dominant culture beauty standard body. um, and how there's such an erasure of elders in dominant culture. And there's such an erasure of the wisdom of aging, and the relationships that we have with our body are on some level linear. I mean, we're born and we die, and everywhere in between we age. But dominant culture would have us believe that that's not really how it's supposed to happen. Like, we're not supposed to get sick, we're not supposed to die, our bodies are not supposed to change as we progress through an entire lifetime of everything changing.
Hmm. That's very interesting. Yeah. So that doesn't sound like it's very real, like the cultural ideas of how
Oh
we're
my
supposed
gosh.
to be.
Well, so don't even get me started on cultural ideas of what's real. I actually, I've been holding back a little meme that I wrote for social media because I was like, oh, this sounds kind of harsh, but I think it'll go up after we talk. Um, that dominant culture ideas about relationship really are romantic relationship. Like, we don't have relationship outside of romantic relationship. And if we're not committed to some sort of cis hetero monogamous partnering, um, that is largely based in codependency, that we don't have love, that we don't have relationship. And outside that sort of consumer, like, patriarchal, capitalist, white supremacy based ideal of romantic love, there's so much richness to be had. Like, the one of the things that I end up talking with other people a lot about in my work, and also because I'm obsessed with it myself, is this idea of belonging. And that we have such a human centric idea of what belonging is, that other people are our source of belonging. Um, and that within dominant culture, one other person is our source of belonging. And outside of that, the ways that we can collectively have beautiful, rich relationships of belonging, and not just acceptance, but belonging. Like, my existence is its own proof that I belong. Um, that we can have that also with, the physical world that is non-human, and we can have that with a spiritual world that is non-physical. And that there are so many ways of understanding and choosing belonging that are outside the dominant ideas about what relationship is.
Hmm. So I don't have to wait for someone else to choose me.
In a magazine world, you do, but I'm going to say no, you don't.
Hmm. I don't know about that. That sounds like some responsibility that I have.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I was just watching Tracy Ellis Ross on the stage with Oprah, and Oprah was asking Tracy Ellis Ross about the choice to be single, and saying, like, oh, you've become sort of this single woman icon. And Tracy Ellis Ross was like, saying the same thing, like, we're taught that we have to wait to be chosen, and she's like, I'm the chooser. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is my next tattoo. Just, I'm the chooser.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And yeah, like what I want to ask you about like a term that you use a lot, which is relational fuckery. Like what is it, and like how does it connect with kind of what we were starting to talk about with like the oppressive systems and the cultures that we're living in, and how are those impacting? And could you like unpack this for us a little?
Oh my God. Okay. How long do we have? I love talking about relational fuckery. I'm so happy that you asked about this. The shortest bumper sticker version of relational fuckery is it's the strategies that we choose in our relationships when we're trying to win instead of cultivate right relationship.
Hmm.
So I have a sort of overarching umbrella set of strategies that a lot of other things fit under. Um, and I just call it attack, defend, avoid, control. Like
Hmm.
those are the things that we're up to when we're doing some relational fuckery.
Attack, defend, avoid, control.
Mhm. And so getting back to responsibility, I didn't want to let that one go by. When we're trying to avoid responsibility, when we're trying to avoid feeling our feelings, when we're trying to control how other people behave, when we're trying to control, um, again, our feelings, like basically trying to get out of showing up and being a human, when we're trying to defend our ideas about ourselves, like, wait, but I'm a good person, like good people don't act this way, so you definitely can't be right in your accusation because I'm a good person and a good person wouldn't have done that thing. um, when we're trying to defend our ideas about other people, like I have an idea about you that you're unkind, so everything that I know about you is filtered through that. Or I have an idea about the world, like, my idea about the world is that it's a cold and lonely place. And so, whatever I experience in relationship is being filtered through that idea. And I'm defending that. I'm more committed to my idea than I am in relating with you. So maybe if I suspend my idea that the world is a cold and lonely place, which it may be at times, like I'm not arguing that that's wrong. Right? But when we're more committed to that, or if I'm more committed to the idea that you are unkind or unintelligent or whatever it is that I've judged about you, or I'm more committed to my idea about myself than I am in just showing up and asking, like, what is the experience I'm actually having right now? And what is the experience you're having right now? And our experiences together, like, is there a way that that could be more joyful? Is there a way that it could be more sustainable? Um, that we don't necessarily have to choose suffering all the time. I'm not saying there isn't suffering in the world, and I don't want to bypass um, that we do live in systems of oppression and we do feel pain and we do experience discomfort and we do bump up against ideas about ourselves and each other that are truly painful. And people do awful things to one another. And sometimes our ideas are we're so committed to them that we don't show up and relate and get to see what's possible beyond that.
Hmm. So it sounds like the ideas that we have about who or what it is that we're in relationship with, like, have a strong impact on the quality of the relationship.
Absolutely. A lot of times I start talking about these things and it feels very theoretical. So I'll just bring it right back to home for me, which is I have this relationship with Ben and we got in a fight last night. And I had some pretty shitty ideas about him while we were not getting along well. And I'm like, um, and he asked me straight up at one point, he's like, who are you even talking to right now? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm so mad at you that I'm not even talking to you. Like I'm talking to my idea about you and I'm so mad at it. And I'm laughing about it now, but it was so painful it was painful to be in that. And I mean, granted, I'm not going to let him completely off the hook. He was being a bit of a shit. And it was like, okay, I took that and just ran with it. Like, oh, you're being a bit of a shit. You are a big shit. Like, and that's who you are. And that's my idea of you right now. And like all of the all of the baggage and wounds that I walked into this relationship with, I'm going to start laying them out on the table right now, um, whether or not that's what's happening in this moment.
Mm.
So,
Wow. So, I'm curious, like, do we ever have like good ideas about people or things that also get in the way of right relationship?
oh God. Yeah. I mean, I think we tend to have really good ideas about ourselves sometimes that, um, I think on a collective level, also, we have, not, I don't know if that's the right word, cultural, I think is probably a better word for this. We have unconscious bias all over the place. We have unconscious bias around like who fits in with the dominant identities. Um, I don't I don't believe that we get to have a good idea about someone, um, that's unexamined without also having the flip side of that coin, like negative ideas about someone that are also unexamined. So when we look at, um, say, what's going on with immigration in the United States, like having this blanket, um, idea that, people from predominantly Muslim countries would be less safe than, we don't say it, it's implied, it's implicit bias that people from predominantly Christian countries are safe, and Christian people in the United States are safer or better or whatever. We do the same thing with racial profiling in this country. The implicit bias is that white people are somehow innocent and good and safe, and Black and Brown and Indigenous people are not. So it's not, because it's a relationship, it's not a vacuum. It's not like, oh, I have this negative bias around, you know, somebody in a vacuum. It's that I, on the flip side, have a positive bias that's not necessarily, contributing to me being in a real relationship with anyone.
Mm. So you're inviting folks to, it sounds like, take a closer look at, how they're showing up in relationship in all areas of their lives, and um, yeah, it sounds like bring more, maybe, intentionality and like a willingness to consciously like make a choice and to regard like everything that's going on here, and not
Ooh, I
just
love
like
that.
the little tunnel vision straight ahead, or behind.
Yeah.
Even I know, like, for me sometimes I do struggle with, like, regarding some of that, the evolution that takes place, and sometimes, like, I can hold grudges and have like an outdated idea of who a person is, or like what my relationship to them is, or vice versa. And yeah.
Oh my God, are we talking about mothers? Because like when you say that, like I think family of origin, the people that we were born into relationship with, like born into our closest relationships with at the time, and then throughout, probably the first decade or two of our lives for most of us, and sometimes even further. Yeah, like over the course of one or two or three or four decades, not to say everybody changes, because some people don't necessarily allow their own evolution very much, but we do change, like as as humans on this earth journey. We're changing, evolving, learning things, having different experiences. And yeah, I think that there's a thing that we tend to do is to lock in to really old dynamics, because we're making assumptions that, like, oh, that person never, and I'm still thinking about family of origin, like that person never cared for me the way that they, should have, because they are incapable. And it's not because they were incapable. um it's, we lock them into, I call it time trapping people.
Hmm.
um and this might be a tangent, you can reel me back in here. But I'm going to go because, I'm a word nerd. But one of the things that we do in English is we have one, only one verb to be, unlike in other languages like Spanish or Italian. Like you have different ways of describing. So I am whatever I am, or they are whatever they are. But temporal states like hunger or age, it's I have 44 years, or I have hunger, or I have anger. And in English, it's like, I am angry. I am this many years old. You are lazy. You are nice. And we don't have a way of indicating that what we're experiencing is temporal and not necessarily a forever state.
Hmm. That is fascinating. And it's making me think about, um, this kind of like what you were mentioning about the different like feeling states, um, either just like on a body level or an emotional level.
Mhm.
Um, and like I know for a lot of folks who have experienced trauma, like it can be hard to disidentify with like certain feeling states of like the traumatized parts of us, and like um but actually there's like even different parts within us that are in a state of process and can shift and can sometimes conflict, and that we're not just like a singular fixed like entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking about that in terms of the way that we describe our relationships, like, oh, we have a great relationship, or we have a, you know, difficult relationship. And that's still a have. That's not a like we are a difficult relationship or we are a great relationship. But and I wonder how much of that is a result, the way that we think about things being fixed and static is a result of systems of oppression. I wonder how much that's a result of us needing to affix identities to people that are unchanging, so that we know where to place them in the hierarchy, so that we know how to treat them,
Mm.
so that we know how to um, reward and punish people because of what we've determined they are or aren't. um, and I would say these systems of reward and punishment that we're in, and these, I call them hierarchies of worthiness, that they are, I would say, the antithesis of right relationship in my mind.
Mhm. So, I mean, that all sounds really like objectifying.
Mm, yeah.
Like you're this kind of person or you are that. And so now you're like a thing that I can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, think about who, when we talk about belonging, even the word itself, we use it to denote possession rather than um, a spiritual belonging. And so, like, we think about like who gets to educate whose children, who gets to talk to whose wife, who gets, like, you know who can be friends with whom based on gender, based on class, based on race. um, how the foundations of, if you're in the US listening to this or watching this, how the foundations of this country are based in the ownership of human beings, as though that's somehow okay. I think it's worth looking at where we came from, so that we don't repeat these gigantic social failures in our most intimate relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. And like, so the relational fuckery strategies that we have, like, it sounds like we're good at them because they're so embedded in like the larger culture.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I like to remind people is we came by it honestly. It's not I I believe us to be creative geniuses in whatever ways that we are, and I don't believe that we have all individually come up with all these relational fuckeries just by accident, like that we are somehow such creative geniuses that we all made up these things on our own. I think we absolutely come by them honestly. There's a thing um, that I learned from Terry Real that he got from somewhere else, but children learn what they live. We're socialized and conditioned into culture, into the unspoken rules um, that we consciously or unconsciously live by, so that we can get by in the world and not in punitive societies, not get punished for being different. Um, so when I talk about right relationship and choice and responsibility and the ways that we can choose something different, I'm not at all saying that it's easy. Like, I am not saying like, oh, of course now you know, and go out and stop trying to avoid your feelings or avoid responsibility or control other people. It's like we we come by it honestly, and it's not easy. It's actually radical to relate to one another as living, breathing, feeling human beings who have innate worthiness.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just like, feel like I need a moment to like take that in. Like, wow. Um, so it sounds like um, if I notice that I'm doing some of these relational fuckery things, that I don't have to feel bad about myself, or it doesn't mean I'm a bad person.
Oh, this is the best question. um yeah, how much should we shame ourselves for doing the wrong thing? That's another thing that we're taught, because we're operating within these systems of hierarchy and hierarchies of worthiness. Like, oh, if I do bad, then I am bad. If I make a mistake, I am a mistake. And when we do something wrong, because we're in these punitive societies, then we deserve punishment of some sort. And if somebody else isn't going to punish us, well, then we should punish us, because that's what a good person would do. So we get to be both the good person and the bad person at the same exact time. It seems very confusing, because it is. Um,
Whoa.
like, right? Like, it's one way of trying to embrace the fullness of our humanity, and it's also very confusing and difficult. Um, but there's a thing about shame, about getting wrapped up in our own unworthiness, and that's that it doesn't lead to more joyful connection or being relational, um, because it's so self-focused. And I'm not saying that to like send somebody into more of a shame spiral, like, oh my god, now I'm shaming myself for feeling shame. It's like we're conditioned to judge everything, including ourselves. And if we can suspend that even momentarily and go, okay, my worthiness is innate and I fucked up. Like,
Hmm.
it's both of these things can be true at the same time. Same with other people. Your worthiness is innate and you kind of fucked up. So the next question isn't like, how do we punish you? Uh, how do we make you different? Because if your worthiness is innate, you don't have to be different. But perhaps your behavior could change so that, this doesn't happen again, so that we're not back into conflict and tension and harm again, so that we could maybe spend a little less time there and a little more time in harmonious relationship if we want to. Um, But do I get where the judgment comes in? Hell yes. Do I experience it and like judge the hell out of myself? Oh my God, yes. It's the least fun thing ever. And when we can stop just for a moment and take stock of like what's really important, the punishment isn't really important. The punishment is perpetuating the same systems that got us here in the first place.
Hmm. What about like people who don't want to be in right relationship to us? Like, what do we do then?
I'm working on that. So this might take a lot more conversation than what we have time for. Um, but I'll lay a little bit of a foundation of every relationship we have is ours. So there's not some nebulous relationship that you and I have like, oh, Stephanie and James-Olivia's relationship. That doesn't exist. I have a relationship with you and it's mine. Like I'm responsible for it. And if it's not right, I'm responsible for making choices that will make it right. You have a relationship with me and it's yours and it's your responsibility. And if it's not right, then you're responsible for the choices you make that are going to course correct, get us, if we want to, if it's consensual and we both want to be in harmony, to do repair. Otherwise, do repair with yourself on our relationship. And that might mean that I'm not necessarily as, I don't get access and proximity to you in the same way. But we have two relationships here, yours and mine. So, for example, there are people in my life who, from my past, from my family of origin, I don't, I would say there have been many years where I have not been in right relationship with them. And I thought, oh, that's because it's your fault. Like if you were different, I could have right relationship with you. Um, and there are people who tell us either through silence or distance or actively harming us that they have no desire to be in right relationship with us. Um, and if our relationship with them is dependent on them, we don't have any, it's hopeless. We can never be in right relationship with them. Um, I know oversimplifying, and I know there's a lot more to this, especially at the collective level. But I get to make choices about what right relationship means to me with somebody who is, you know, distant, withdrawn, abusive, whatever they're choosing to be, that shows me they don't want closeness, they don't want harmony, they don't want right relationship. Um, I get to make my own choices around that. And that choice might be going back to estrangement, like, okay, right relationship for me that's sustainable and just, and where there's room for me is I don't have contact with you anymore because there would be no room for me in any conversation that I have with somebody who's abusive.
Hmm. So having like a relationship that's sustainable um, involves like there being room for you and like to sounds like take care of yourself, however that looks for you and like from moment to moment.
Yes, that's the other thing about relationships. You don't have any relationships that you're not in. Like, there's no relationship you have that you're not in. Every relationship is an ecosystem, and you live in that ecosystem. Um, so, if there's not room for you, absolutely not sustainable to stay in it as it is. It doesn't mean that every relationship where there's not room for you immediately has to be like, okay, now that person has no access to me. Like, you know, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and cut off everyone who we don't deem ourselves to be in right relationship with. What we can do is ask the question, how do I make room for myself? What would create more space for me? What would create more sustainability here? Um, I think that's one of the ways that we're probably all constantly navigating our own boundaries. Like, oh, okay, this boundary, that didn't work. Like, this is a little too close. I feel a little bit resentful of something that's going on here. Or like, oh, wow, that doesn't feel great to me. How do I make room for myself? And I like the thing that you just said too, is how do I take care of myself? Because we are in every relationship we're in, if we're not showing up to that relationship resourced, it makes it a lot harder to have any kind of harmony in our relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. So, like, it sounds like there's some effort and consciousness involved, and maybe, like, yeah, it's not that easy all the time. But, like, why should we bother? Like, what do we get, like, individually and culturally and collectively by working on being in the right relationship?
Um, the obvious answer is it's more fun. Like, it's so much nicer to be in relationships where there's actually room for us and it's sustainable, and um, where we're not resentful or suffering or you know having terrible feelings about ourselves and other people because of the way that we're engaged with them. Um, and not only, I'm glad you brought up collectively and culturally, because it's not just interpersonally. When we are, sorry, I got a typewriter jam, like all the words wanted to come out at once. um, when we are concerned with, and it's not, I don't think that there's a, there's not the way. Like, one of the white supremacy culture tenets is that there's only one right way. And part of this earth journey is that there are so many right and wrong ways, um, and just so many ways, right or wrong. Like, that's not a binary either. There are just so many ways, and some of them are effective and some of them aren't, and some of them are working and many of them aren't. These ways of being in interpersonal and collective relationships with one another. But if we're thinking about the sustainability of these relationships, the two questions that you've heard me ask about a million times about right relationship is there room for you, and is it sustainable? And that first question, is there room for you, you're the only one who can answer that. Like, nobody gets to answer for you if there's room for you, or how there can be more room for you in the relationship. The second question, is it sustainable? If the answer for you is no, because there's no room for you, that's enough of an answer. Like, you've gotten to the no by yourself. You don't need anybody's confirmation that it's not sustainable. If you get to a yes, it requires some confirmation on the other side that you actually are sustainable. You don't get to decide alone if your relationship with somebody else is sustainable for them.
Hmm.
So, right? So that's the part where we have to actually show up and relate with the other humans or beings involved. Um, and so what is the benefit? Like, why would we even bother? Why do we care about this? Is because a relationship is an ecosystem. Like, my relationship with you, you're in it. Um, and so am I. That's like, you might only be in it in my mind. Like, if we never talked again, God forbid, but if we never spoke again on this earth, I would still have a relationship with you, and I would be in it. It would be mine. And for me to not be in right relationship with you, even in the idea that I'm holding about our relationship, I'm living in that ecosystem. And if I'm engaged in a bunch of relational fuckery, if I'm, um, avoiding, attacking, consuming, extracting, controlling, um, I'm poisoning the ecosystem that I live in. It is in our self-interest to have sustainable relationships with the people, the beings, the earth, the spirits, everything around us. Um, because you can't poison the ecosystem that you live in and still be healthy.
Mm. Yeah, that's another one of those unreal ideas
Mm-hmm.
that, from the dominant culture is just, I mean, we could see with what's happening like in the climate and all around this planet.
Yeah, with our air, with our water, with our land. Um, I say our, collectively, all of our, like the resources that we depend on because they nourish our bodies. That is definitely a particularly colonialist perspective, that we're somehow outside the ecosystems of our relationships. Like, oh, there's this relationship, like, James and Stephanie's relationship is over here, and James is over here, and Stephanie's over here, but somehow the relationship is some like floating somewhere else. And it's like, no, it's wherever we are.
So they're happening right here, right now, in our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
like with every breath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say relationships are living things because we're living things, and we are them. We're in them.
Wow. Yeah, I can feel like the parts of me that are like that use the relational fuckery strategies to feel safe are like, ugh, that's terrifying. Where am I supposed to go hide?
That's such a good question. Um, I love that you say that. I love that you are really explicit about the safety part of it, because that's why we're doing them. That's part of the reason I don't want us to beat ourselves up emotionally and judge ourselves for having learned these strategies, because we want to feel safe. We want to feel protected. We want to belong. We want to, like, goodness and rightness are both safe ways of being culturally, in the US at least. Um, and so we want to be good, we want to be right, we want to be protected, we want to be accepted, we want to be safe. Um, and so where do we go to hide? I'm not convinced that hiding is always the safest thing. Sometimes it is. I'm not judging it. Sometimes hiding really is the safest thing we can do. And when it isn't, but we've already got it ingrained that that's the only strategy that we have, it doesn't always serve us. So, like, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's perfectly safe, and sometimes it's not effective anymore. It's a thing that we learned and it's not effective anymore. And sometimes, like, what is the opposite of hiding? Like, presencing the thing, telling the truth about what's inside us, or telling the truth about what we're experiencing or observing. Like, hey, I see this thing happening. Let's not hide from it. There are times when that can be more protective than allowing the thing to continue.
Hmm.
And I think we're seeing that with, you know, the the young water protectors and climate protectors that we have in the world right now. Like, we're not going to hide from this. Like, let's tell the truth, because that's going to be a more sure route to safety than pretending and hiding.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I remember you pointing out at one point that a lot of times when we think we're hiding, we're not actually hiding.
Yes, this is Ben's famous dog with its ass out hiding behind a tree metaphor. Like, I can see you. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes hiding's not effective because we're not actually doing it. We only think we are.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I could just keep talking with you about this forever. But to kind of bring this conversation to a close for now, I'd love to know, like, about your vision for planet Earth, for this
Oh
journey that
God.
we're on. Like, what's your vision, and like, how does right relationship fit in?
Mm. Um, no pressure, no big deal, right? Like, uh, what I have right now is that right relationship nourishes, that it nourishes us, it nourishes each other, it nourishes sustainability, the the earth, everything that we in right relationship, really right relationship, have more access to joy and sustainability. Um, I also like to think that it leads to less suffering. I may be wrong about that, but I'm holding on to it for now. Um, and it's not something like I talk a lot about interpersonal relationships. That's sort of that's my sweet spot where I like to live and analyze and coach people about skills and getting more capacity and why the desire could be there in the first place. And that as a vision, right relationship nourishes as a vision for the world, is so much bigger than just our interpersonal relationships, and it requires so many more voices and um, so many more people and groups and movements um, who care about right relationship on scales that I don't typically confront moment to moment the way that I'm always thinking about interpersonal relationships. So,
Mhm. So, right relationship nourishes,
mhm.
and you have a vision for more sustainable relationships of all kinds, and more joy and less suffering.
Yeah, yeah, I would love for us to have more joyful connection and less suffering in our relationships.
Yeah, me
That's what
too.
that's what gets me up every day.
Yeah. Um, before we finish up, like, what are some ways that folks can get to know you more, connect with you and your work? Um, like, what's going on in the world of James-Olivia?
Ooh, thank you for asking. And thank you for reminding me that I have a website. I spend a lot of time playing in it, forgetting to tell people that it exists. So I would absolutely invite anybody who's watching or listening to come to visit me through inquisitivehuman.com, where you can find out whatever's fresh. So right now it's nearing the end of February, but by the time you hear this, it'll be April, and who knows what will be up there then. But last year and moving into this year, last year I started 100 conversations as a project to just have lots of conversations with strangers. Um, and also not strangers. I'm really happy when people I know sign up for them too. But right now, I am just in love with the conversations I get to have with people that I didn't know before about right relationship. Particularly, I'm starting to talk with people also about forgiveness. I'm calling those the F word conversations because we've got a lot of stuff around forgiveness. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind about forgiveness or like advocate for it. I just want to know what people learned and what their experiences are. So if you've got an experience of forgiving or not, choosing not to forgive or not being able to, or whatever that experience is, or an experience of being forgiven or not being forgiven, I am here for those stories. Or if you just want to talk about right relationship like Stephanie and I just did, I love those conversations too. So you can find that on inquisitivehuman.com. There's a little tab that says 100 conversations, and you can just sign up for one. Because I love talking to strangers one on one. It's weird. Um, and I I want to, the easiest thing that people understand is I teach a class, but I don't actually teach it, and it's not actually a class. Um, but this program called Regard, and it's 16 weeks of sitting around with a very small handful of other humans, exploring right relationship and what it means in our actual lives. So Stephanie and I just had this, you and I just had this, kind of theoretical conversation, but in Regard, we sit and talk about like what's going on in your actual relationships, and how you can move toward more joyful connection if you want it, or away from suffering if that's the direction that feels more appropriate to talk about. Um, so that will be happening. The next one will be happening in, I'm looking at my cute little calendar back here, July. So we'll start in July and it'll go for 16 weeks. And one-on-one coaching. So if people want um, to just have these conversations that are really intensely devoted to your own skills and your own capacity around being in right relationship, that is also one of my favorite things to do. Or partners or small groups as well. So
So many different ways to connect and converse and have your mind expanded. That's always my my experience speaking with James-Olivia. And yeah, definitely encourage all of you who are watching and listening to check out James-Olivia's website at inquisitivehuman.com. Sign up for one of the 100 conversations. You will not regret it. And yeah, I just want to thank you so much, James-Olivia, for having this conversation with me, for being part of this event and sharing um, your brilliant ideas and perspectives, and like inviting us all to show up and practice right relationship with ourselves and with others, because we're always in relationship.
thank you so much. I am just tickled to talk with you every single time we get to talk. And I can't wait to listen to everybody else's interviews and conversations because you attract such brilliant, beautiful people to you. So I'm really honored to be a part of it. Thanks.
Oh yeah, I'm really honored to get to do this and host this event. And um, before I go, I just want to say also thank you to everyone who is watching and listening today. Thank you so much. So glad that you could join us for this. And just want to wish you lots of love and many blessings on your journey.